wonderful people. Welcome once again to the Public Policy Cafe. It's your host, Victor Jibril Mohammed. In our previous lesson, we discussed the policy subsystem. We talked about actors and their beliefs, and actors forming coalitions to push a particular policy agenda. In two lessons before, we talked about the policymaking process, where I discussed the various stages. In subsequent lessons, we are going to discuss each of the policy making process. Today, we will start with agenda setting. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. With agenda setting, today we are going to talk about societal problems and agenda setting, and we are going to look at some factors that facilitate an issue getting on the agenda of policymakers, and then we talk about how societal problems get on the agenda. Societal problems and agenda setting. Well, before I talk about this, let me give you a scenario to make things quite clear. Let's assume I have my own car, and for some reason my car stops moving. Now, being a car mechanic, I know the engine has broken down and it needs fixing. This situation is an objective assessment of the car based on my expertise. Now I then put fixing the car on my to-do list. Societal problems is quite different. I know your assumption is that, of course, this is how societal problems should be handled. When there is a problem, government needs to fix it, and then everybody is happy. Well, it doesn't work like that. First of all, the issue of scarcity. Government do not have all the resources to solve all the problems in society. Some of them they are even not aware of. And two is that the definition of a problem, societal problem, is not an objective one. The definition of a problem is of a societal problem is shaped by the worldview and beliefs and interests of actors in the subsystem. Therefore, what the societal problem is, who caused it, and whether it can be solved may vary depending on which policy actor you ask. For example, let's take the issue of climate change. Some years ago, for example, let's take the issue of climate change. Some years ago, climate change was a controversial problem. The conflicting actors in the subsystem were, and I believe still are, environmentalists and business interests such as the oil and gas industry. Now, the climate change issue is highly contested by these actors, and what the problem is keeps defined and redefined among these actors. One of the key issues in the debate is whether climate change is caused by humans and human actions, and whether our actions could resolve it or ameliorate it. Some of the debate also center on reducing carbon emission or moving towards environmentally friendly energy. The takeaway here is that the definition of a societal problem is always a political issue, and objectivity is less. That is why it is not always the case that when there is a societal problem, it automatically goes on things government decides to do. That is agenda setting. Now, let's look at some factors that facilitate issues to get on policymakers' agenda. It is important to note that when a societal problem gets on the agenda of policymakers, it doesn't mean it is going to be resolved. What it means is that policymakers have recognized that this societal problem needs to be resolved, and they dedicate resources to resolve it. But whether the problem will be resolved or solved depends on the amenability of the problem. First, I'm going to talk about is irrefutable evidence. In policy analysis, one of these irrefutable evidence is the focusing event. Focusing events are basically um, focusing events are basically sudden catastrophic disasters that affect a significant number of population or people, or causes havoc that have effects on important sections of the population of the country, such as floods, fire outbreak, etc. Another irrefutable evidence are alarming statistics that get at the attention of the public. Another factor is the influence of the people affected by the policy, or the influence of their representatives. For instance, when the societal problem affects business interests, especially powerful businesses that employ a large section of the people, who or businesses that underlie or support the general economy, the response rate is likely to be higher than when the problem affects a portion of the town or population that are not very influential. Another factor is public awareness in this content. As we all know, in democracies, legitimacy of the government rests on public support and popular vote, and politicians being rational beings try to appeal to the consent of citizens, or at least try to be on the good side of public the public, or of the general population. So when there is a problem and the large section of the population shows their discontent of a particular issue, policymakers are likely to put that issue on the agenda. It doesn't matter if they have the ability to resolve it, they're going to put it on the agenda to make public, to be on the good side of the public. How then do societal problems get on the agenda? We analysts have three main models to explain this question. But before I talk about these three models, let's re-establish some facts. So first is that in a polity that is in a particular society or state, government has the legitimacy to make decisions, that is policies. So I, Rector Jibril, or you, cannot make cannot see a public problem or societal problem and make policies to resolve the problem. You can't do that. You don't have the legitimacy to do that. Second is that there are policy actors outside government, such as non-profit organizations and professional organizations, labor union organizations, etc., that have policy interests and wishes which they want to reflect in national policies. In addition, the public and the general public and public opinion or public support is a strong resource that many actors or many policy actors try to tap in and use to achieve their policy goals, especially in a democracy. These three facts will help us understand the three models when we are analyzing how issues or societal issues get on the policy agenda. Now that we've established these facts, let us look at the three main models that we use to analyze agenda setting. So The first model is the outside initiation model. And the outside initiation model is when a problem or a societal issue arises amongst NGOs, who then expand the issue to the general public with the aim of getting public support, and then with government being rational actors, policymakers being rational actors, then puts the issue on the agenda to please the general public. An example is when a problem affects a non-powerful segment of the population, let's say indigenous people, and then NGOs that work with indigenous people then creates public awareness and garner public support, which will in turn force government or policymakers to react. That is the outside initiation model. The mobilization initiation model is quite the opposite. So usually this usually happens in authoritarian regimes, or when the issue at hand is more complex. Government brings up a policy and expand or mobilize public support to legitimize the policy. That's basically it. And the inside initiation model is the third type, and this is when groups such as business groups closer to decision makers have policy goals and try to push the issue on the agenda. But the key thing here is that the aim is to avoid public attention. It is usually related to issues that the larger public are likely to be against this policy interest. So these groups in this area, like business groups, sneak in these policy interests to policymakers through lobbying and inside working, etc. So this marks the end of today's lesson. To recap, today we talked about societal problems and agenda setting, which looked at some factors that facilitate an issue to get on the agenda, and we also talked about how societal problems get on the agenda. Thank you once again for coming to the Public Policy Cafe to get some lessons, and hit the subscribe button if you've not subscribed, and don't forget to click on the bell notification so that whenever I drop a lesson like this, you get the notification. Enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao.